Hey YouTube, we are back with a tier 10 bots tier list. A lot has changed on the bot front, especially with the new reinforced striders showing up and the new tank. So we have to update our tier list and see where things lie. I think Luna's got to go see some birds, but she just wanted to say hi before she's off to work looking out the window. All right, getting into it. Oh, I didn't even plan for this, but the autocannon starting us off on support weapons. It's an obvious S tier. It hasn't changed at all. It's a fantastic choice for dealing with the new reinforced striders. I think it in the future will be far better versus the artillery tank. The problem with the artillery tank right now is if you blow up the engine compartment at the back, it immobilizes the tank, but the top of the tank is still spinning and shooting at things. Some people say they don't run into this issue. Every time I see someone try to blow up the new rocket tank via shooting the engine compartment, which does work, by the way, versus other types of tanks, like the typical shredder and so on and so forth. I don't know why, but this one has launched with this bug. Hopefully they can address that soon. But yeah, the autocannon is just fantastic. It's your overall well-rounded support weapon. It deals with everything on the bot front to quite a high proficiency, to the point where like other support weapons blush because they wish they could deal with everything as well as this thing. So highly recommend checking out the autocannon if you haven't already. Stalwart, I'm going to put it right down and it needs changes, at least on the bot front and even on the bug front. The Stalwart just struggles to have much of an identity just because light pen does not work well at all on the bot front unless you have pinpoint accuracy. But at that point, there's so many better weapons for pinpoint accuracy light pen. I cannot recommend anyone bring the Stalwart unless you're doing a much lower difficulty mission and the majority of enemies you're running into are like maybe some Devastators and the majority being like Berserkers and light enemies. But like, you know, the reinforced Strider that you're running into now, like this thing just doesn't do very well unless you can hit those precise shots on the rocket tips. For those who don't know, you can shoot the rocket tips on the new reinforced Striders, quad rockets, and it will actually explode and kill the Strider if you get that off, which is actually really cool. I love it. Arc Thrower is like a C to like a needs changes. I would like to see maybe the Stagger be returned to the Hulk. It was very niche. It wasn't very good, but it was cool that it could do it. And also probably giving it back its range that it once had, because like the new range on, or newer range on the Arc Thrower has just put it in such an awkward spot where like it's like bringing a flamethrower Stalwart to a bots mission. It's just, you can do it if you really want to, but you're going to have to convince yourself that like you don't want to use any other support weapon, which just perform far better. So hopefully in the future that we can see the Arc Thrower get used a little more by giving it more range. That would be the bare minimum for me. Going into the HMG, absolutely love it. Absolute A+ stratagem pick, especially if you pair it with the supply backpack. And for those wondering like why isn't it any higher, it's really good. It is really good, but the ammo economy, it doesn't have many mags, and especially on the harder difficulty, like difficulty 10, there's just so many more Devastators and things to spend your ammo on that you're going to need that supply backpack. So, and for that reason, I can't just put it in S tier. Autocannon, for the most part, doesn't need much in the way of ammo economy. Naturally, over the course of the match, you will get your ammo pretty sorted. In situations you might be running a little dry, just make sure as a team that you're kind of sticking together so you can utilize that stratagem call-in more effectively. MG43, I think is a solid weapon for bots. I always get these comments that like, yeah, you could deal with Hulks. Yeah, you just have to like have some balls and get behind them and shoot them in the back. Sure, but so can your primary weapon, right? Like the reason why it doesn't go any higher is because it doesn't have medium plus pen. It can't penetrate the Hulk's eye. Most Devastators have medium pen, which you're going to be matching, so you're going to have a 50% damage debuff just because of that. It can be quite good against Devastators and spraying at a distance, you know, just prone. But the fact that it can't really deal with Hulks, and honestly, I want to say that the Hulks are very oppressive in the tier 10 difficulty just because there's so many of them. Every POI you go to will probably have at least one or two. So if you can't deal with Hulks efficiently, that will definitely affect where it goes on the tier list. So for that reason, I still think it's in a fairly good spot and it's fun to use, but it doesn't quite have that next, you know, tier of like proficiency. Going into the next one, I think is the AMR. I want to put the AMR in like an S- A+ territory. I do feel like in a lot of situations, I want to put it in A+. And the reason for that is because it doesn't absolutely require a supply backpack like the machine gun, but it is very useful to allow you to use it as much as the autocannon and if more. Because a lot of time when I'm using the AMR, it's my primary weapon. I'm running around with this as my primary to kill Devastators and, you know, one tap the legs of the new reinforced Strider. For those who don't know, it's one shot to the Strider. It's even better than the autocannon in that regard. you know, mag dumping the stomach of a factory strider or mag dumping the radiator of a laser cannon turret or something like that. So it definitely goes through ammo fairly fast in certain situations. So it's why I want to put it like an A+ at times, but I'm going to keep it an S- just because of how good it is versus Devastators and how good it is at sniping the legs of those new rocket striders. I highly recommend checking it out if you haven't. If you're getting bored of using the autocannon, it's a great pick. Great pick. Grenade launcher is similar to the machine gun. It's fun to use with the supply backpack and just like spam at like Devastator hordes, and you will get a lot of kills. On average, it's 2 grenade launchers to smack a Devastator, which is pretty not bad, especially if you have the cojones to get below a bot drop and shoot up onto the ships. You can mass wipe tons of bots before they even have a chance to mess with you, but it's very risky. And if you don't bring the supply backpack, it will suffer as far as ammo economy. 2 backup mags is just not enough. I keep saying it on my tier list. Give it at least 4 backup mags. So 5 total. I think it would be in a much better spot. But until they do that, it's kind of relegated to that, especially since you can't really deal with Hulks that easily unless you get a flank. You can technically shoot between their legs if you aren't too close and have like the safe arming distance screw you over. But it's not like a reliable or ammo efficient way to kill Hulks. It's a, if you are forced into that corner kind of situation, you can. Laser cannon is in an all right spot in tier 10. I do feel like I would only use this on cold planets. I've been using it most recently on the new Desolate Moon biome that's coming closer to Super Earth. I'm forgetting the name off the top of my head. I'm sure someone in chat might say it. But it's been a lot of fun on the cold planets. I do think, you know, pairing that with like the sickle or another laser weapon, you just swap back and forth, or just like a trusty AR that you like sniping Devastators with is like, it's a good option. I do like using the laser cannon. You just got to play more passive, and you will probably get frustrated when you're getting flinch spammed. So you maybe bringing the shield generator to reduce how much flinch you're dealing with can help you. The railgun is going to sit right up here in the A tier. I love the change that they made to the gunships. For those who don't know, gunships require way less durable damage in general to destroy an engine, which is fantastic for the railgun, which has high damage but not much durable damage. So it's a lot better position now. It's on average 2 shots to the front engines, like 70 to 80% charge. It's fantastic to kill gunships now. And for anyone that might say in the comments that that's too slow, no, it's really fast, especially if you have the reload buff from the ship modules. And as soon as you shoot, press reload. You will get a faster cycling of rounds, especially if you're a little bit proactive about making it reload. I think some people kind of forget that they need to reload it and they don't immediately do that, but you can get 2 70 percentile shots off very quickly, and you can deal with a lot of gunships. It's fantastic versus Hulks. You could one-tap them, so if you get really good at it. It's also very proficient versus Devastators. A lot of people forget that like it's a very easy kill in Devastators. All you have to do is hit their upper body, and they're sliced in half. Also really good against the new Reinforced Strider. So if you're interested in like finding something good, you just have to hit them somewhere in the upper body, and they just fall over. They might look like they're alive, but they're falling over. So highly recommend. The railgun doesn't necessarily need the supply backpack, but it does help, similar to other support weapons. So highly recommend checking that out. Flamethrower needs changes. We've already talked about this on the bug front. Obviously, they've nerfed the charger's leg, but it doesn't really change how it's just not good on the bot front. We've talked a lot over the last like 2 weeks about like what we would change to the flamethrower if it couldn't go through a charger's leg anymore. And I think the most reoccurring one that I and my chat keep bringing up is like the ability to melt armor would be really interesting. So if you could hold the flamethrower on a particular armor piece and like it breaks it or eventually goes through, would be an interesting take. Or just allowing it to do like more main health damage on enemies would also be an option as well. I know Thickfilet always says more range. You know, imagine if it actually had like the World War II kind of flamethrower range where you see like I think it's the Crocodile Sherman like firing it like 50 to 100 meters. Like that'd be crazy, but you know, dream big, I guess. Quasar is a solid option, but I just find myself not wanting to recommend AT weapons necessarily for bot missions. They are nice to haves, but I think in most situations, grabbing a medium plus support weapon, which we have all of them right here, it's just a better bet. And if you wanted to bring AT, you have EATs and Commando. Like, I think the Quasar is either like an A- or B+. I'm going to keep it an A- for now, but it might swap throughout the tier list if I feel like the A category is a little bit too full. As far as shooting down dropships goes, it hasn't really changed. I don't recommend shooting them down. You're better off saving the ammo for that Hulk that shows up or that tank that shows up, or for the Quasar, saving the cooldown. It can be useful if you get into a situation where there's a lot of the new rocket striders, because rocket striders will die if you shoot down the gunship early enough. They just fall over, but they're one of the few enemies that do. It's like tier 1 bots, the rocket striders, and then like all the other ones will just survive it the vast majority of the time. So keep that in mind. Commando is a solid A+ pick. You know, you don't have to bring it by itself. I don't necessarily recommend bringing this as your solo support weapon, but it's awesome when you pair it with another support weapon. If like it's like actually a really good pairing with like the railgun, because the railgun suffers against tanks in particular and like radiators in general. But if you pair this with like the commando, for instance, it does a really good job of like covering your bases, right? You're not really going to be using this versus tanks because it just takes too many shots. So maybe bringing the eruptor or the commando to cover that base for the railgun works really well. The recoilless, I'm going to put it closer to like the B+ territory. It is nice that you can reload it and get it faster, more shots off than the Quasar, but ammo is definitely more concern on bot missions, I find, just because there's so many Hulks that you're going to have to deal with, and there's so many tanks, and there's so many rocket striders you're going to shoot at. Factory striders you're going to shoot at, that like you will quickly go through and exhaust all your backup ammo very fast. So it once again is like, I recommend more of the use like the EAT or the commando in those situations. Next, going into the AT, I'm going to put the AT around like A-. I think it's a fairly good option for someone who wants to bring some AT alongside their loadout, but it definitely is not as powerful as the commando. I forgot to mention for the commando, it still can kill fabricators from any direction. So until they implement some kind of change for like other AT weapons, I've been saying that, you know, if they're not going to remove the ability for the commando to shoot a fabricator from any direction, probably the best course of action is just to give all AT weapons the ability to kill fabricators from any direction, and maybe just give Spear a buff somewhere else, like give it more damage versus Factory Striders, because right now Spear's not great versus Factory Striders. Talking about it, I think the Spear is like a low A, B+ kind of stratagem. The reason I'm not going to put it any lower is because my chat likes to tell me, for the people that struggle with aiming, this is a good option, especially if you have a teammate that's willing to support you and help you. But the ammo economy is not great. The tracking is good, and it does good damage versus, you know, fabricators at a distance and being able to snipe them. But in a lot of those situations where I'm sniping a fabricator, I'd rather just use a commando because it's easier. Just put the blue laser on the target and it goes. The Spear, even with the fix to the tracking, you're going to get situations where it won't track to the fabricator you want it to. So I do hope that maybe in the future the Spear gets some more love, and then I'm going to be using it versus Factory Striders more often. Because like at the moment, it's good on the defense missions. That's another reason why it's in A tier, is that it's in defense missions. It's invaluable in defense missions and stopping the Factory Striders from one-tapping your generators. I recommend having one person bring the Spear and just aim only and use the ammo only on those like Factory Strider turrets, so they're not firing over the walls at your generators. It will save you a lot of failed missions. Airburst, I debate putting this in needs changes like all the way at the bottom, just because there are instances where the airburst can be very useful. Like in mass devastator spam scenarios, like if you place correctly, it can kill a lot of devastators at the same time, which is pretty cool. But if I'm in that situation, I think I'd rather just bring the grenade launcher, because it essentially does the exact same thing, but better. And it doesn't have a terrible reload, and it doesn't have a bad ammo economy, and it doesn't have the chance of killing me nearly as often or my teammates nearly as often. It does need serious changes, and honestly, it's dancing between the two. It should probably do more damage per like explosion, individual explosion, and the explosion should maybe have more pens, so I want to use it versus like a Factory Strider or something along those lines. I want it to be more universal as like the cluster bomb weapon. But another one, faster reload. It's got a terrible reload right now because it doesn't have any tiered reloads. Most weapons in this game have a tiered reload, so if you interrupt them halfway through, it will remember what stage you're on, and then you continue from that, right? Airburst doesn't have that. If you were like a millimeter from like fully putting in the rocket into the tube and you had to interrupt it because you got ragdolled, which happens a lot, you have to restart. You have to start the entire thing over, which sucks. So hopefully the airburst can get something faster reload or something along those lines for it. Both mechs I'm going to put in like C tier, B-. I've seen people like utilize them fairly well in mech mission or like in bot missions, just like being careful about laser cannon turrets and Factory Striders. But now that they've given Factory Striders 2 shots back to back, they're even more lethal versus your mech. And it's just really difficult to make it work. So the only thing I can really see them doing to mechs to make them more usable in bot missions is you have to give them even heavier armor, which I don't know if they want that, because mechs are like somewhat class cannon-y, and it seems like they want that. I'm not sure. Like if they gave them heavy armor or enough HP to be able to resist at least one laser cannon turret shot, it would be in a much better position, but who knows what direction they're going to go for. Similar to the bot mission or the bot stratagem video that I made, vehicle bay could help mechs a ton, right? So we still have that stratagem hole that I think is from the first game where you could throw stratagems out of your mech while inside the mech. I think a lower cooldown, more ammo would help the mechs be like definitely like closer to B tier. So whenever they decide to give us that vehicle bay ship module, that'll be great. I'm going to put the shield generator right there in A tier. I think with all of the ragdoll spam and so on and so forth that it's currently in the game, I still think it's a fantastic option for those that want to reduce how many stims you're using and just reduce how much flinch and ragdoll you're dealing with. If you are getting frustrated about ragdoll, this will reduce a lot of the ragdoll you deal with in a given bot mission, just naturally. You don't even have to think about it, right? So highly recommend giving it a try if you are just in that position where you're just waiting for Arrowhead to address it. And they have stated that in the next 60 days, there will be some form of an address to Ragdoll, which is awesome. All right, Ballistic Shield. Right before posting this video, quick little story time, the Ballistic Shield was used, and I hated it. It felt like a liability. And I know there's going to be some Ballistic Shield enjoyers out there that are going to be mad at me for saying this, but with the addition of how many explosive weapons on the bot front, especially at tier 10, this thing breaks way too easily. Like, and I mean like breaks, like you can't use it anymore. Like it's not just usually getting knocked to the ground because you got hit by a rocket, but the new rockets from the reinforced riders, like basically 2 to 3 shot it. Like it died so fast. I was actually surprised. I was asking chat, like, what happened to my shield, guys? Where'd it go? And they tell me, oh, a rocket hit it. And I'm like, wait, what? It seems like the rockets do individually as much as like a tank shell. So you have to be so careful. You might be trying to use your shield to kill these striders, but then, or like protect yourself from the random like lasers, but then a random rocket can just hit your back, or like your back as you're running away, or hit you while you're like trying to like tank some shots, and it's broken and you're just waiting on cooldown, and it's not a short cooldown to get your ballistic shield back. So I've said this many times in these tier lists, and it still goes. The ballistic shield needs some love, and it either needs to be indestructible, like it cannot be destroyed by tank shells and stuff like that, or it needs significantly more health. And that's aside from the point that I feel like it's not very good in any scenario where there's a lot of rockets flying around, because you're just going to get ragdolled every time you try to use this thing, to tank laser shots and stuff like that. Yeah, hopefully they address it in the future. Jetpack is an okay choice. I'm going to put it B-. I think it's a fun choice, and it's an okay choice for those that want to be very aggressive and like push in, push out, get some high ground so the bots can't shoot at you. In the right circumstances, I think the jetpack could be incredibly useful. I don't see that use a lot of the time, but I think some people do, especially for getting over those high walls and getting into high ground more reliably, easier. Just keep in mind that it takes a lot to understand when you should and shouldn't bring the jetpack, and when you should and shouldn't use it. It does have trouble on bot missions because, it's competing against the supply backpack, and it's competing against the shield generator, which are two very reliable options, and they don't require nearly as much effort to be good. So we'll see. I hope that they reduce the cooldown in the future. The guard dog, the AR-23 guard dog. This one's like a C+, B- kind of stratagem. I think it's in a lot better state now that the ammo economy is significantly better, but it still doesn't have medium pen. And I've been asking for medium pen for so long. Please just give it medium pen. That way, this thing has an identity on bot missions. Far too often, it wastes its entire mag trying to shoot the eye of a Devastator, and it hits around the eye, but every shot just ricochets, and it does nothing. It doesn't kill anything. And then you might see the kill counter go up, but it's just killing tier 1 bots. It's not hard to kill in tier 1 bots. So does it really have that much use? Not really. I'm going to put it here just because for the individuals that want that extra damage versus like berserkers running at you or tier 1 bots, so you can focus on the other guys. It's okay. I still would say bring the laser guard dog over that, but it's not like nearly as bad as it once was, where like you ran out of ammo significantly faster and you had like no ammo for it. So it's better, but I would still, if you're going to bring a laser guard dog or like a guard dog, I just bring laser. It fires so much longer. It does good damage still. And in those body situations where like it's aiming at a Devastator, it's more reliable to kill it because it has more chance to kill it because it doesn't have such a small magazine. Just like in the Terminated mission, we are going to put Terminated tier list, we are going to put the supply backpack all the way up in S tier. It is fantastic. And it just enables so many support weapons to feel like you can use them as primary weapons. Also, keeping you alive a lot. You have practically unlimited stims as long as you're paying attention somewhat to your, team-based support call-in. And you can do some like crazy things where like, if everybody runs up to the resupply, that you call in as a team, you drop your backpack and you get your teammates to pick up their share of the ammo with this thing on your back. You can fully resupply this thing if everybody does that. It's time consuming, but it's incredibly ammo efficient if you can do that. You could triple the ammo on your team by doing this. If you feel like you guys just want more ammo to spam at Devastators, Spy Backpack and a little bit of forethought is incredibly powerful. Highly recommend checking it out if you haven't already. It pairs well with so many support weapons, like I said. AMR, HMG, Railgun. It's so good. All right, orbital position. I don't think there's any surprise. It goes right up there, dealing with detector towers, tanks, the odd patrol. I typically throw like a stun grenade and one of these at the exact same time. It kills the patrols very well. Good versus factory striders. Good versus like basically everything. It's a fantastic choice. Highly recommend. EMS Orbital is okay. I still think it needs a shorter cooldown, larger radius, affects more enemies. Because if this thing like could affect larger tier enemies that normal stuns couldn't, there's more of a reason to bring it. But at the moment, stun grenades kind of just fit the niche of what this thing can do. But like if this thing could like stun a factory strider if it impacted it, that's really cool. Makes getting up to a factory strider with your support weapon way easier. If it could stun a tank and so on and so forth, or if it had a larger radius, so you can kind of like throw it under a bot drop and like it stuns way more enemies, that'd be awesome. But I would just rather bring the EMS mortar if I'm going to bring something that's EMS like this, unless they make it better. So, yeah. Walking Barrage, I think, is a solid B now. I'm debating whether or not it's like more of like a B or B+. I don't think it's quite A, just because it still lacks this situation. Like, I'm going to say it's B+, but it lacks being useful in all situations, because there's a lot of time where you want to throw it, but you would rather have the 380, or you'd rather have the Gatling, or you'd rather have like the over precision, right? It still has such a long cooldown, and it's the places where it's super useful is like long columns of enemies walking towards you, which just doesn't always happen, or softening up a base. But a lot of the bases are designed in a way that if you just throw a 380, you're better off because it has more shells. It affects like a larger plume because a lot of the bases are like rectangular rather than linear. But I can definitely see the situations where this thing's useful. You can throw it at a base that has a detector tower like the new mega bases, and it will try, especially if you aim it correctly, it will try and get to it. Now, down to RNG here, it might not hit the detector tower. It could miss. The 380 has a higher hit chance because it fires more shells in a concentrated area. I'd rather just bring the 380 in those circumstances. And for that reason, I love bringing the 380, and I highly recommend 1 to 2 380s on a team in every tier 10 bots. And you'll be like, why? What makes it so good? Just clearing bases? No, because you actually throw it where the bot drop is coming in, and it eliminates so many bots for you before they even come out of that bot drop area. Also, throwing it at the big mega base, you probably need 2, to fully saturate the entire thing. But because the cooldown is not nearly as bad now, with the 5% reduction on our ship modules, and just the fact that our bot drops come in at about the same cadence as the 380 comes back, it's just such a good option. It's there when you need it for those bot drops, and it's great. It's so good for it. 120 millimeter is an alternative, but I find it doesn't last long enough for some of the really long bot drops that happen when they're coming in like 10 plus ships or something like that. The duration just isn't quite there, and it's not one-shotting all the enemies, and the explosion radius isn't as large as the 380. So you'll find situations where like the bots are more separated, and it's not killing as many things as the 380. But like in like extraction scenarios, or like where there's a lot of enemies in front of you, you need them to die faster, it's better than the 380 in some like very choice situations. But the 380 typically has more purpose. Gatling Barrage, I think, is like a B+, A- stratagem. I do like it, and I like how short the cooldown is, but you kind of need a narrow pathway and enemies walking into it to truly be effective. Because a lot of times you'll throw it at a patrol, it'll kill a lot of patrol, not everything, but it'll kill a lot of it. And then it's just wasting so much time continuing to shoot in that one area. So you need to find a spot where like bots are constantly walking in. And I just feel like in most situations, I'd rather have another stratagem that's a little bit more lethal to more enemies, like the over precision, or bring something that has a little bit more radius. It's an awkward position because like 120 and 380, I'd rather bring than orbital precision or orbital Gatling. Orbital Airburst, I think, is like a middle B. It's somewhat similar to Gatling, but I'd rather bring the Gatling just because it has heavy armor pen. Airburst overkills the targets, the medium pen targets, but that's about it, right? It doesn't quite have enough cadence or time between the shots for more bots to come in. So it'll kind of kill a bunch of bots in one area, similar to the Gatling, but then it doesn't last as long, so it doesn't even have the benefit the Gatling has. It doesn't have heavy pen, so there's a lot of enemies it just doesn't do anything versus. It's pretty good, but I would rather bring other stratagems that have a larger effective area so they can affect more enemies. Gas is similar to Airburst in the sense that it doesn't have much of a radius, and enemies need to stay in it in order to die, but they die slowly because the average HP pool of a bot is a lot higher than bugs. So it needs more love. It needs a larger radius. I think maybe the initial call-in should probably do more damage. Just thinking about it now, it can kill like a sensor tower if the actual shell impacts it, or killing a stratagem jammer that has been deactivated. So maybe that it deserves to be a little higher, but I don't think it deserves to be that much higher, because in any situation you would be using the gas strike. I think you're just better off using the precision, especially now that the orbital precision has a 10% greater radius on the ship modules. I still think that orbital laser is in a fairly good spot for bots. It's a great option for someone that just wants to throw it and forget about it. They don't want to have to aim or think about where they want to put it. It slays out on bases, kills a lot of high tier enemies quite quickly. And if you get fairly lucky with the angle at which it's attacking a factory strider, it can kill a factory strider very quickly. But it is slipping over time based on the fact that we're spending longer in these missions. So you want to have more uses. So only having the 3 is affecting it. And there's more and more Hulks and high tier enemies. So it's taking longer to kill those enemies. So you get a little bit less value. But if you get a mission that is like nothing but Devastators or like the Rocket Striders, this thing slays. Or tanks. This thing slays tanks as well. It does a really good job. And it's like very highly efficient on your defense eradicate missions as well. If like everybody brings a laser, like you have 4 lasers, and you just time them one at a time, as one ends, the next one goes up, it makes eradication missions really easy, especially if you pair them with like other orbitals. So highly recommend. Still an option there for someone, but if you have the ability to think a little bit further ahead on where enemies are going to be or come from, the 380 I would argue is the better one, especially since it has a smaller, shorter cooldown, and you can use it more times throughout an entire mission. Orbital Rail is okay. I still think it needs to do more damage for factory striders, needs a shorter cooldown. It's cool for those times where like a Hulk just surprises you and scares you. But I don't think I would be using it a ton in tier 10s other than for like a viewer requested loadout. It's more of a low tier, like there's one Hulk that scared me and I need this thing dead right now. But in the higher difficulties, I would recommend more like bring the orbital position with a stun grenade. It does the exact same thing and kills more than one enemy. So keep that in mind. Hopefully they alter or buff the orbital rail cannon in the future. A lot of people have been asking for it for a while, so hopefully we can see that come through. Orbital smoke is like very mediocre compared to its Eagle counterpart. It has a lot of gaps. It's not killing fabricators like the Eagle smoke is, and in general, smoke isn't always super useful in tier 10 missions. So, because like I feel like in a lot of situations, I'd rather just have a lethal version of an orbital and just kill the thing that I'm hiding from, right? I do still say in a lot of my tier list videos that I do hope that they redesign orbital smoke to maybe be more of a defensive stratagem where you throw it at your feet and then it creates a curtain of smoke around you in a large circle, rather than being like just a worse version of the Eagle smoke, which is in a linear line, and it's way better at like not having any gaps in between the smoke plumes. And for that reason, I think the Eagle smoke is a solid option if you want to be stealthy versus orbital smoke. And like I said, Eagle smoke also kills fabricators, if you guys didn't know. So you can use that in a clutch moment. 110mm rocket pods is like an A- pick still. It struggles in situations of like really high HP enemies, but it can take out Hulks. It's very good against tanks. It can weaken and destroy the top turret of a factory strider. It deals with fabricators quite reliably. My only issue is that like it's competing against some better targets or better Eagles at like doing more, right? So Eagle Airstrike is very reliably in the S tier still. Nothing really has changed there. If you want to use an Eagle, you use this one. It kills chaff really effectively, Hulks, Devastators. It can kill factory striders as a 1-2 combo with precision strike. It deals with fabricators. The only thing it doesn't do is it doesn't deal with detector towers. And another reason why Eagle 500 kg still deserves to be an S tier, because unlike the orbital precision, it does have more of an explosion radius. And I know there's going to be people in the comments say like it was bad in this situation or bad in that situation, or it didn't like it. The visual is way bigger than the actual explosion, but it does have more effective range than the orbital precision. you will kill more things if it lands on a flat surface and you land it like fairly close. And it does do a bunch of damage when it impacts as well. So you can impact a factory strider, get it to land below a factory strider. It can do a ridiculous amount of damage to them as well. And you get 2. So 1 stratagem slot, 1 factory strider dead. You know, versus the orbital precision, you're not quite getting that same value. You know, and I think we've all been in situations too where you're throwing, you know, a stratagem at a detector tower and it bounces off and like lands in some awkward spot and it's too far to blow it up. With the Eagle 500 kg, you have more leeway to make that mistake. And the cooldown is not that much longer than the orbital precision. So it's still incredibly good. And honestly, sometimes the better option than orbital precision. You know, preference, but it sometimes is. Eagle Strafe is still in a very, I think, somewhat mediocre position. I think it needs to have more saturation in that line because I feel too many times I've seen Devastators or tanks just like survive the strafing run. And I don't want that. I want things dying more reliably in that line when I call it in. I want things to die. I want it to do more damage in general, but specifically in that area that I called it in. Like, I shouldn't have to call in 2 to 3 to kill, you know, a line of Devastators or to kill a tank or to like weaken a factory strider. I want this thing to be the A10 Warhog that it deserves to be. It's getting there, and I like the previous buffs to it, but I want more. It's okay now, but it needs more, especially on this hard difficulty. Eagle Napalm is another one that's okay to use versus bots. The reason why it's here, not lower, you might be like, fire's not very good versus bots. What are you talking about? At least the Eagle Napalm has like an explosive effect when the bombs of napalm land. And those bombs do a surprising amount of damage to Devastators and tanks and so on and so forth. So you can use napalm in those situations to kind of have a curtain of fire, and it's kind of like a budget airstrike in that regard. It can kill fabricators. So yeah, it's fairly useful, but it, like fire in general, just has never done a lot to bots just because their overall HP pool is just higher. So yeah. Eagle Cluster, I think is like a solid A minus, and some people might be a little bit surprised by that, but it's because it has 5 uses and it has good spread and it can affect a large area and it got good damage. When you guys are getting spammed with Devastators, this is a great option for that. Just having one person on the team be willing to use this to eliminate tons of Devastators for you so you don't have to use other things, and a pretty reliable method of doing it, especially if the person that is using the cluster bombs is like good at visualizing the drop pattern and to not throw it at teammates. It is quite good. I do recommend, you know, like trying it out. If you feel like, you know, you don't really want to bring the Eagle Airstrike, you want to try something else, you know, having those 5 uses will definitely feel nice when compared to the Eagle Airstrike at sometimes. I want to say the Rocket Sentry is like a solid A minus. I do really like it as like a SAM turret. Everybody always says, I want a SAM turret added. This is your SAM turret. It's really good versus flying targets, especially if it doesn't get focused immediately by all the rockets. It is very ammo efficient. If you put it into a safe spot where enemies can't really get to it or see it very well, it will snipe Devastators at long range. It will kill tanks, Hulks, Factory Striders if the top turret doesn't snipe it. It's a fairly good option, and I do recommend checking it out. It's just you will get certain situations where like you use it and it might instantly die if it's too close to enemies, and like a Rocket Devastator just wants it dead. And for that reason, like I could easily see myself putting it lower, but I think it deserves to at least be there. The Autocannon Sentry is going to sit right next to it because it's like the counter to like some of those enemies that are spamming it, because it has so much stagger and it does a lot of DPS. So you can get the ultimate value out of it faster, rather than the Rocket Strider. You want to get more of its value out of it over a longer period of time. The autocannon can kill a lot of things very fast, including factory striders if it's hitting that like front faceplate. Just similar to the Rocket Sentry, you want to somewhat protect it and put it into a good spot. Distance is its friend, because Rocket Devastator's dispersion pattern gets longer or wider and wider the farther they are, and that's the main threat to turrets at the moment. EMS turret is like a solid A+. I don't think it's always the most useful thing in all missions, but if someone on your team brings it, I'm happy. It's just a lot of CC, and on defensive missions, this thing slays, and you might be like, well, it's not really doing anything. It keeps things sitting still, so it's easier to kill them with either your normal mortar or your stratagems. And it just gives you more breathing room in general. It's kind of like having like 20 stun grenades, but it automatically targets things, and it just makes your life easier for doing other things like using your support weapons or using your offensive stratagems. So highly recommend giving it a try. With all of the Devastator spam, I have been seeing Gatling Sentry be used in quite a few ways. Because it's a very high DPS weapon and it's medium pen, it does do quite well against the Devastator spam. Heavy Devastators do, though, counter this pretty well just because their shield is heavy pen required. And even then, like, it doesn't really work with heavy pen. It's okay. I do sometimes prefer the machine gun sentry over it just because I like having the shorter cooldown, so it doesn't feel like I have to get as much value out of every use of it. And I like throwing the machine gun sentry sometimes behind a patrol that I'm like dealing with, so the heavy devastators get shot in the back instead of all the shots plinking off the front. It's cool to use the machine gun sentry in those situations, and you can definitely do that with the Gatling, but I think they're both like okay for bot missions. I would recommend maybe HMG emplacement or trying out the mortars. HMG emplacement is in a good spot. You can kill a lot of things, but it does get countered by tanks. It is very scary when you have a tank bearing down on you. Someone to have a charger will bully you. Tanks bully you with the heavy MG. But if you get the right variant and there's like next to no tank spawning, this thing can absolutely slay out. And I think there's situations where you could easily argue that this is like an A+ stratagem. But I think overall, I want to say it's closer to like a B+, A-, just because it gets completely countered by tanks. And it's very easy to get sniped by rocket devastators at a distance that maybe you might not be dealing with at distance, or maybe you didn't realize they're shooting at you from like a left or right, flank. I could easily see myself putting it in like A-, but I think it more or less deserves in most situations to be a B+. Regular mortar is going to sit there right next to EMS mortar. Great option versus bots, very ammo efficient, and if you pair with EMS mortar, they pair extremely well together, especially if you put them right next to each other, because they might shoot at the same target, meaning that the EMS mortar will lock them in place, whereas the aggressive mortar will just nuke them. Very good versus tanks, very good versus Hulks, Devastators. It is a bit stupid versus Factory Striders, and it will try and kill a Factory Strider. It basically does no damage versus a Factory Strider, and it will try and kill a Fabricator. So if you don't have the ship upgrade, I would keep this thing away from like attacking POIs. But if you do have the ship upgrade, try to ping enemies that you want it to attack so it doesn't waste all of its ammo trying to kill a Fabricator. All sentries in general are stupid like that, and I hope that they update them in the future so they don't try and kill Fabricators. None of these can kill a Fabricator, other than you could technically get lucky, and like the explosive ones can technically shoot in the door, or like in a weird situation, maybe it could shoot in the vent, but very unlikely. Tesla Tower, don't bring it on bots. I could maybe see a situation where maybe someone could like hide it behind cover, and as enemies advance, they like walk into the line of sight on it. But like, it's so situational on like you making it work that I just can't recommend it. On top of that, all arc weapons in general get kind of countered by heavy devastators just because their shield is very resistant to it. So hopefully maybe they can just make it healthier in the future, like even healthier than it is now. So it just kind of sits there tanking damage. That'd be kind of interesting. Shield generator, I think, is like a C, B- kind of thing. Now that hell bombs can be shot and blown up after arming, don't blow them up with an explosive weapon, by the way. It's bugged and it doesn't like actually explode the hell bomb if it's an explosive weapon. Shoot it with like a regular ballistic round. Okay. This is like less useful because like that was the thing that people always like Maple. You can use it with your hell bombs to protect them, but it was never that good at doing it because it doesn't have much health. It doesn't have much duration. This thing needs double the HP and double the duration, and then it would actually be in like a pretty damn good spot. I'd love to see it reevaluated after that happens. And like, it'll shoot way up because there's so many situations where people are like talking about like bots are so lethal. I have no cover on this map. I have no cover on that map. I want to protect myself. I want less ragdoll. This could be an awesome way of countering a lot of that. If your team could just like bring one or two of these, you have so much more cover. It'd be so nice. So I hope Arrowhead's listening to the community, because it's not just me saying it. This thing needs some love. It deserves to live longer. It's okay on the really low difficulties because there's not that many devastators and damage flying around, but especially now there's so much damage flying around, especially range. Like, it's crazy. Mines, AT mines, I think is going to be like a B-, C+ kind of stratagem. Like, I can see the point of like throwing down a minefield and like devastators walking through it, or a Hulk walking through it and dying. But would I rather have this or a sentry, right? Because they have the same cooldown. They have similar kind of thought processes of using them. I'd rather the sentry. The sentry is far more dynamic. It can respond to enemies changing their trajectory and like which way they're coming and approaching you. And I don't have to worry nearly as much about my stratagem being cucked by my teammates. And what I mean by that is that you're going to throw in your mines, and then your teammate throws down some stratagem, and it blows up all your mines, and your mines are now useless, right? Like, it happens with sentries too, don't get me wrong, but it happens far less because you're typically throwing the sentries next to you. So your teammates are typically not throwing stratagems on you. Fingers crossed that they're not. So yeah, AT mines are definitely better than regular mines. I do think regular mines are like a solid C/need massive changes, but like I hope in the future that mines in general become more visible to players. Maybe they deploy their mines more than once, and they just get lower cooldowns in general. Like, if AT mines just had like a 2-minute 30 cooldown or a 2-minute cooldown, I definitely would see them as like, okay, I see more of the point of like, well, if it does get screwed over by your teammates, at least you're not waiting 3 minutes, you're only wasting 2, right? We're getting into that kind of territory. I can see it being more useful more often, but it can get screwed over too hard. And for that reason, I can't put mines any higher. Okay, looking at my tier list so far, how do I feel about where things are? I think to some degree, maybe like EATs or Quasar and Spear could maybe be lower. Just because like in general usefulness, I think I would much rather see a teammate that has a more dynamic loadout for dealing with many more things than just anti-tank stuff, especially when the vast majority of anti-tank enemy or like enemy tanks and, you know, armored enemies can just be taken out by like a commando or taking them out via like one of the medium plus pen weapons with a precise flank or like a precise shot to the eye, like for a Hulk. Other than that, I feel like I'm pretty happy with where things have landed. Let me know down below what you guys think of the stratagem tier list. Let me know what you guys are running. I think a lot of my loadouts tend to be like a support weapon with either the spy backpack, some barrages, maybe a couple eagles, every once in a while a sentry for fun. But that's typically what they're looking like. I'm mostly avoiding, you know, mechs and stuff like that, which I'm kind of sad about. So yeah, consider dropping by the stream. We do these live every time there's a big enough patch that I feel like it's warranted. Also, link down below, there's a Discord if you want to join Discord and ask me questions when I'm not online. I stream every morning, for the most part, other than Mondays, NA or EU mornings. We'll be sprinkling in some variety coming forward, but if you're looking for some Helldivers in the morning, come on, drop by. We can talk about stuff. We're a bunch of Helldivers nerds, and we're not nearly as salty as some other places on the internet on Helldivers content. So if you enjoyed it, consider dropping a like, commenting down below, and jumping by the stream. Thanks for dropping by. Bye, everybody.